everybody. Welcome back to the Reds Rundown podcast, hosted by two lifelong Reds fans and journalists. I'm Rob, he's Joe, and we thank you for taking the time to join us today. Joe, how are we doing today?
Personally, great. As a Reds fan, not so great. As a USA soccer fan, not so great. We're down bad right now. I'm waiting for football season at this point. As I mentioned last week, I kind of gave up on the season just to keep my expectations low and not to get drawn back in. And they almost got me this week, Rob. They almost got me back. They were so close.
Yeah, I saw you on Twitter, and I really thought about putting it out there that we're back, baby. But then I knew the Tigers series would be stupid. And it was. So, no, that was good. You may notice as well, I look a little different. I'm trying to change the vibes, Joe. I'm trying to change the vibes. You know, when you get into a slump or something, you make a change. Okay. So I decided that I'm going to make a change. And if you're just listening and not watching, I no longer have facial hair. So if you really want to see that, you can go check it out over on either the TGH YouTube channel or the Reds Rundown YouTube channel. Both, and either will be available to you. But that is all to say, we have our question of the day, Joe. Do you even want Matt McLain to try and come back this season? We are going to discuss that a little bit later, but we want you guys to let us know in the comments below or on Twitter. Let us know what you are thinking. Oh, what a roller coaster of a week, Joe. What a roller coaster. The Reds head in to New York, to the Big Apple. And we're wondering, and both of us predicted, I believe, an 0-3 in this series. We were not feeling very good about it yet. The Reds did a lot of things that they don't do. They started it off with a 5-4 victory. Elly had some big hits, including a home run. Right-handed, I believe, as well in that game. Will Benson also had a home run. And Graham Ashcraft was solid. Sam Moll gave up a run, but Fernando Cruz and Alexis Diaz came in and locked it down for a Reds win, 5-4 over the Yankees. Aaron Judge was really the only one that did much in that game, including hitting an absolute missile of a home run. Then we head into the Wednesday game. Reds come out on top 3-2, and I'm already sitting there like, wow, this is kind of crazy. Noelvi Marte hits his first home run of the year, a rocket. Stu Fairchild hits a home run as well. Andrew Abbott pitches a hell of a game, to be honest with you, and Diaz gets a nice double play and a quick ninth inning for him, as the Reds are again able to keep the bats of Soto and Judge under wraps. You head into the Thursday game, Joe, and you're wondering, it's Montas versus Stroman. No way Montas is coming out on top of that one. Well, you would be wrong. Martini, India, and Steer all with big home runs. Frankie pitches well. Nick Martinez gives up a couple late runs, but the Reds are able to come out on top 8-4 as they put up 5 on Marcus Stroman. The crazy part is you head into the weekend series. They're coming home. They've just come off a humongous sweep of the Yankees. They're 3 games under. They're only 3.5 games out at that point, and you're thinking, oh boy, this Reds team may have some life in it. Well, I could tell you on that Friday game, you would be wrong. The Reds could not get to, I forget what his first name is, but they were really not, what was it? Reese Olson, that's right. Who had pitched well, but had, as we had said, a terrible record. Carson Spires didn't look great. He was getting hit pretty hard, but he still kept them in the game. He kind of reminded me of Abbott in this game, to be honest with you, where he found a way to limit damage at different points, but it was just not enough. Unfortunately, Brent Suter giving up a run ultimately ended up being the difference, where the Reds had a chance to win. A guy on third, 1 out in the 9th, and for some reason, Blake Dunn goes on a contact hit after David Bell pulls Nick Martini for him. I still really question that decision to not have the veteran in there and to have the young guy having to make that decision. He was too far off the base from what I was told. I was driving home at this point because I was pissed off and didn't think the Reds were going to make their comeback. They really did give it a go, to be honest with you. It was nice to see. Spencer Steer also had a mammoth home run from, I think it was like 4:30 or something like that in the 5th inning. 5 was the magic number for the Tigers this weekend, Joe. 5-3 win for them in the Saturday game. Steer had another home run in this game. Stevenson had a big double in it as well. Hunter Green pitched outstandingly against a bullpen day for the Tigers. But Fernando Cruz, who has been struggling lately, gave up some big runs. Sam Mole as well, who's been very consistent this year, unfortunately gave up a couple extra runs, and the Reds were unable to win as we head into the Sunday game, where Graham Ashcraft could not get out of the fifth inning. He didn't look terrible. He only gave up one run, but you're having to play these games right now like you would a playoff game, or a playoff game. Skubal was as great as advertised, 13 strikeouts against a very terrible swinging team, to be honest with you. Austin Wynns, for some reason, only hits doubles. I believe he has more than quite a few players on the Reds team, and they're the only hits that he has so far this season. For a 3-0 series sweep against the Reds by the Tigers to put us right back where we started, essentially, after an outstanding beginning of the week against the Yankees. And, Joe, I'm going to just... Normally we talk about the games themselves. I want to start with our first topic of the day because it plays into it so much. Why can't the Reds find any consistency? Is it just that they're young? Is it that David Bell is to blame? Is it the lack of leadership? What is going on with this team? Like, why is there no consistency? Because all they had to do was win one game against the Tigers. Just one, Joe. And it would have been huge. Truly, it would have been an outstanding week for them, and they just could not figure it out.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of everything, but I think the biggest thing for the Reds this week was they were scoring all the runs on home runs. And this team, as we talked about in the preseason, not a team that's built to do that necessarily. They're a team that's built to do small ball, but they're not hitting for contact. Like, they just don't. There's no one who has a great average. India's really boosted it, but, like, for the most part, this team does not hit for average. And when you rely on these home runs, it's just not going to give you any chance to win games when we're relying on guys like Elly De La Cruz and Spencer Steer, who are young and not entering their prime power years yet, but also they can hit home runs. But that's like the two leaders on your team. That's not the greatest thing. You have Jamer, who has 14 home runs, who's one of the top three guys, only three guys who have double-digit home runs for the Reds. And his like career high for home runs, I believe, was like 16 before this, so he's killing it. But like, you cannot be a team that is built to play on contact and then only win based on home runs. They hit so many home runs against the Yankees. They did get a couple against the Tigers as well, like you mentioned with Spencer Steer. I think that's just it's kind of like a mixture of all of it, but that's the thing that I'm noticing the most is like, you can't have a team that's built like this and be like, oh, well, we're hoping to have 2 home runs a game and we'll win. That's not sustainable at all.
No, it's not. And what's interesting is it's like the guys who are your contact guys on this team are still gone. You're still missing Friedel yet again, and you're missing Matt McLean. Marte has looked awful since he has come back. But he did do this last year, so I'm going to give him a little bit of credit. He started off horribly last year and just went on a tear for the rest of the season. So maybe, it just is that he really just needs some extra time to figure it out. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt for right now, to be honest with you, Joe. He's still not really striking out above the league average or anything right now. I'd like to see him see some more pitches and lay off those breaking balls away. But he has not been the help that I thought. You have Fraley, who's gone on different injuries. Stevenson as well. Looks like Martini's going to be out for a little while. Apparently I saw TJ Friedel as well. Or not TJ Friedel, sorry, Stu Fairchild as well may be injured. So I don't know, man. I mean, it's like, I feel like if this team had everybody healthy, it's constructed perfectly for what it is, right? Obviously, you could have better players at every position, but I feel like the plan was there at the beginning. I just don't think that they've adapted very well, and I think it's partially because they are so young. I think David Bell's not necessarily made the best decisions, but I mean, what are you going to do when you're having to start players like Austin Wynns, when you're having to start players like Blake Dunn and depend on Jacob Hurtubise to get meaningful at bats all the time? Levi Jordan as well, right? Like, Levon Soto came up and got 3 at bats this year. Like, Will Benson is having to play every day because you don't have a better option right now, which is honestly horrifying. So as much credit as I like to give the front office during the offseason, and I think the way that they've wanted to construct this team so far, they have I'm actually going to place the blame at their feet. They have not given Bell enough options. They have not helped him with the young players that I think are really just, there's no protection for them. I know they signed Jamer with the idea that that would be the case, and India's been hitting better, but it's realistically been 3 or 4 guys all season, and they line up in a team that's 14 players deep, right? 13, 14 players, depending on how they construct the roster at the time. When you're not getting production out of 9 or 10 of those players, that's pretty awful, to say the least. And I'm not going to place blame on guys like Santiago Espinal, like Luke Mailey, like Nick Martini even, because they're not expected to start, and they're having to play on a regular basis. So it's really disappointing for me. I think the reason they're not finding consistency is not just the injuries, but you talked about it, I think, very specifically at the beginning of the year. There's been no depth at AAA. None. Most of the time for a team like this, you want to have a ton of guys who are available, who can be brought up, who you take flyers on, who are a little bit older, who have some veterancy. They kind of did it with Mike Ford, but they let Tony Kemp go. Dude, that's looking real rough right now. Not that Tony Kemp's been doing great, but he would have been a nice guy to have compared to all these other guys right now. He's a much more of a contact guy, and I think he would have really helped this team. The other guy who we'll talk about here in just a second, Joey Votto. Man, I know the bridges were burned. He was expecting a lot more than what he got, but by the time that he was willing to accept a AAA assignment from Toronto, the Reds should have been talking to him again to try to get him back. So for me, I think it's a combination of a lot of things, Joe, but I do think that the front office has really hurt this team and has let David Bell down. And it makes me feel bad because I'm making excuses for David Bell, Joe, but it's kind of hard not to when you see the guys he's having to put in the lineup on a regular basis.
Yeah, I mean, we mentioned it a couple weeks ago. This is not one person's fault. It is a organizational fault that starts from ownership down. Like their biggest weakness, I mean, they think their biggest strength going into this season we thought was their depth, right? Because they had too many guys to play too little spots. Well, a couple injuries threw that out the whack. Our biggest weakness was definitely AAA depth. We just brought up so many guys last year. The only guy who might have been in AAA by now who would contribute would be Edwin Arroyo. Yep. I think he might be, but even then, he's never played above AA before this season. So that is being exploited because we have the injuries on the pro level. And I think it goes down to, like, David Bell is making some bad decisions, but some bad decisions are going to be made. I would love if this team doesn't reach its potential, which I think is make the playoffs, and I don't think it's going to happen. I would love to just clean house, keep all the players you want, keep all the young guys, but clean house of the front office, clean house of the manager. I don't think that's going to happen, but it is like a lot of the players aren't available for David Bell, but David Bell also makes bad decisions. The players, again, seems like they're trying to hit for power and not contact, but they're built to be a contact team, and the home runs are not sustainable because we just don't have the power bats in the lineup. It's all over the place. I just hope that maybe this next offseason they do focus on getting some more veteran leadership at the major league level, and then also hopefully some of those younger guys, because we still have a decent farm system. They're just all in AA or lower. Hopefully some of those guys move up to AAA and give us some MLB hitters, because that's what we're really lacking, is we don't have a guy we can bring up who can just be like, all right, maybe this guy can hit 250 for 2 weeks and really help us out. Our guys we're bringing up are hitting 100. Like, we have Jacob Hurtubise, who I love, Blake Dunn. They're not really hitting that well. So it's one of those things where, right, like we were stuck with Will Benson right now, and I would love to send him down. I would love to bring someone else up, but like whoever you're bringing up is not helping the team, and that just exploits our lack of organizational depth at the top of the minor leagues.
Yeah, it's been really hard to watch, honestly, and I will, I will say that it's hard not to wonder what this team could have been without the massive amounts of injuries. Losing McLean and Friedel and Lodolo. I mean, Lodolo's been a stopgap guy all season long. So is Hunter Green, Abbott even. Like, you should win 3 out of every 5 games right now with those 3 starting, right? Like, not consistently. Like, maybe you'll find another win with Montas or with Ashcraft or Spires. because their pitching war has been one of the best in baseball. Joe, I don't know if you've seen that or not, but starting pitching wise, I think it was top 2 or 3, and then relieving wise, it was top 5. I want to say, and I really think their pitching has been solid. Like you look around, and their runs allowed are very low. To be honest with you, they have one of the lowest amounts of runs given up all year in the National League right now, and it's really hard. I mean, let's put it this way: the Rockies have given up 522 runs this year. Joe, we are almost 160 runs less. Like that's 2 a game. That is significant, to say the least. Even some of the other teams that are in the playoffs right now, San Diego has given up 50 more runs this year, but they've also scored 50 more runs. So it's like there is that trade-off right now, and it's been the lineup. And to me, the weird thing is, Joe, is it still feels like if they could get a couple bats, this team could make a run because the pitching's been that good. But the problem is what do you have to give up for that, and what do you need to do? That was answered overnight last night. It was really funny, Joe. I'm not going to say it was all because of the mojo that I was giving off after shaving, but within 2 hours after I had shaved, the Reds went out and made a trade. The first trade of the season. They went out and they got Austin Slater and some cash considerations for Alex Young, lefty bullpen guy who's honestly been very good down in AAA and was good for us last year, obviously, as well. But that we have 3 lefties right now. Suter's been fine. Mole's been very consistent. And Justin Wilson's actually not been too bad. He's been pretty solid against lefties specifically. So they traded from an area of abundance, right? We'll have to hope that you normally only need 1 or 2 lefties, so having 3 has worked out for them. But they trade Alex Young for a guy who has not been bad in his career, Joe. He's been very good against lefties, something that we have desperately needed. And along with that, he's coming off of an injury, but has been hitting very well since then. Last year, Joe, he batted .288 against lefties, .226 against righties, which is not great in this offense. He would probably need to hit against some righties a little bit more often. But over the last few seasons, I'm bringing this up here 1 second. Over the last few seasons, he's been a pretty solid contact guy. He's not a starting guy on a regular basis. He's a nice platoon guy who I think they will definitely platoon specifically with Will Benson moving forward. He plays all 3 outfield positions, but over the last 4 seasons, he's batted .282, .241, .264, .270. His on-base percentage has been pretty nice as well. He had an OPS of .914 a few years ago. Last few years has been .774 and .748. Just to give everybody an example of what that would look like, at .774, he'd be batting right around where Spencer Steer is right now in terms of OPS. So he is a solid outfielder overall. He's got a lot of experience. He's only 31 years old. The Reds give up basically nothing for him, to be honest with you, Joe. And I'd have to imagine that as long as he's in town, which I'm sure he took the first flight from wherever San Francisco was playing to Cincinnati, I would have to imagine he's going to be in the starting lineup tonight or at least at the latest tomorrow. But what do you think of this move, Joe? And does it move the needle in any significant way for you?
It does not, because we did not get a starter. But I will say it was a good trade. I would have rather traded Justin Wilson. I do not think he's been good this season, around a 5 ERA. But you don't know if they're going to take that deal, right? So it's not just that they want a lefty, they want a lefty who might be better. And just because Justin Wilson's on major league level does not mean he's better than Alex Young. So I'm cool with that. You mentioned our bullpen has been a strength since May 18th. We're the second lowest ERA in baseball. They mentioned that on one of the broadcasts this week. I forget which game. So we are trading from a part of abundance, and everyone likes to kind of shit on the bullpen, but they've been fine. They've had some of their issues. I think more of our issues are maybe the 4th and 5th starter. I mean, they're still doing okay, but just that would be where I would address first. So we trade a place from abundance. We get a bat that he hasn't had the same barrel rate that he's had in past years. I
Hmm.
think maybe that can be corrected when he comes to Cincinnati. I think maybe at our ballpark too, he can have some more success rather than playing that huge ballpark over in San Francisco. Um, it's the same thing as Santiago Espinal trade. Even though Santiago hasn't played the greatest, it's just like we're getting a guy who can help us a little bit, but it's not going to push us over the top. And if we're not giving up much to get him, the same way with Santiago Espinal, why not try it? So if you're still like, if this is like a slow, like, hey, we're going to help you a little bit, and if you guys prove you can win some games this week, maybe we'll make some trades after this that make it help us push forward. I'm kind of okay with that because I don't want them to make these huge trades and then like, oh shoot, we're still 10 games under 500 after this week or something, 6 games, under 500. That might be a waste. So this is a nice trade where you're not losing anything for the future. You're getting a guy who in the past has hit for contact. I think again he can do better with the Reds. I thought that with a lot of guys we've gotten this year, so I don't know if we should really trust that. But no,
That's
I
fair.
like the trade. It's a great trade. It's just one of those that we're getting a guy who helps us, but not to the point that is going to really, I believe, push us forward to start getting towards the playoff spots right now.
Yeah, and I think Stu Fairchild's honestly a pretty good comp for this guy. I think Stu's a little faster and a little younger though, but I think this veterancy of this guy and his ability to show that he has, over the last 4 seasons, been a valuable bat is what I will say, a valuable player. His WAR has hovered around a 1 all year, which on this team would be significant, very nice for us to have, to be honest with you. So he is a solid defender. He's relatively fast. Even back with the old stealing rules, he had a 15 steal season, which is not insignificant back then, to be honest with you. So a lot of people think that he's going to be a lot better coming off the injury. He's been playing a lot better apparently as well. So, it really does to me spell the end of somebody like a Will Benson, to be honest with you, because I think that they would like to keep him if possible. I'm going to check. I had not checked this, so I'm going to do that real quick. I'm going to see what his contract looks like as well, because, he's a cheap guy regardless, but yeah, it looks like he's a free agent starting next season anyway, so I believe Alex Young was going to be as well, so not really much of a loss there. He doesn't cost you very much either. And I think, if you are running an outfield of Spencer Steer, Jake Fraley, TJ Friedel, Stuart Fairchild, and Austin Slater, I think those are 5 guys who are pretty solid. You're not having to rely on Benson anymore. You're not having to rely on Nick Martini or Blake Dunn. I think that they're anticipating that Friedel will be back here shortly, and that Slater will be able to fill in that Stu Fairchild role until he comes back. And then, funny enough, you'll actually have 3 right-handed hitters in the outfield instead of just the, well, realistically it's been 2, but mainly we considered Steer the main guy for most of the season. So not the best move that we could have made, but not the worst one either. I still would really like to see them go get a real outfielder to start alongside of Spencer Steer and TJ Friedel. I really don't want it to be a Jake Fraley and Austin Slater platoon in right field right now, but there could be worse, Joe. It could be worse. So we'll take it for now. I honestly think like you said, they gave up basically nothing for him. If he can come in, if this guy comes in and hits 250 for the rest of the season, I think you and I will be like, send this man to the postseason All-Star game. They don't have one, but let's do it. Elly got in and was hitting worse, so what the hell? Why not?
Yeah.
Moving on from Austin Slater, we are excited to have him here in Cincinnati and see what he can do for the last half of this season. I wanted to ask you this, Joe, and I know fans wanted to know this probably as well. Should the Reds seriously look at bringing back Joey Votto? Here's my reasoning for it. He has come back off of injury. He will be available to play soon and will have to either come up to Toronto or accept an assignment at AAA permanently, or not permanently, but at least for the foreseeable future. I can't imagine he would cost the Reds very much at this point, to be honest with you, unless if for some reason the Blue Jays actually trade Vladdy, which there have been rumors that Vlad Guerrero could be heading somewhere else during the trade deadline. But with CES out all year, with the need for another bat, I said it to you before we start the show, with Slater coming, that opens the door for Will Benson to leave and for you to not have to rely on Nick Martini. I'd rather have Joey Votto as a left-handed bat than literally any of the other left-handed bats that have been getting platoon time or whatever you want to talk about it. I think it would make sense, to be honest with you, with CES out. Um, I think it would make sense unless if they go out and get an outfielder and move Steer back to first base on a more permanent basis for at least the rest of this season. Yeah, I really wanted to get your thoughts on this because, to be honest with you, this is the time it would make the most sense for them to do it. And it would be a nice welcome, I think, respite for this team. If you're going to make a run, I think Votto might be the guy that could help them do it. I'm sure they could mend the relationship enough to help him just enjoy the rest of this season and get back to playing well. And dude, how great would it be to have a guy who can actually get on base, put the barrel on the bat, and be able to give some protection. I mean, seriously, he could come back and genuinely bat third for all I care. He could bat sixth. I don't care. Put him somewhere, but he would make this lineup better, even at age 40, than than guys like Will Benson who are in their early 20s.
Yeah, he's not hitting that well in AAA right now, still recovering from the injury. So we'll see how he keeps on coming back here in the next couple of weeks. I mean, the Blue Jays are out of it. They're 8.5 games out of the wild card, especially after this week. Once we get to the All-Star break, teams will really reassess what they're doing. If they're having conversations about trading Vladdy, which are real, and maybe because Vladdy hasn't necessarily lived up to the hype that we all hyped him up to be.
Yeah.
But that to me says that, like, hey, we're done with the season. We're not going to try to go for it. They've already traded Biggio. Not that he was playing that well either, but don't want to trade those guys that you started to build your team around. I would say go for it. And I'm not even saying like, hey, I've said I'm kind of out on the Reds making the playoffs. It could help you, sure, but like, don't let this guy who's a legend of your team go play for another team. Go get him. If it's going to be something where it costs us a prospect that's like, somewhat valuable, don't do it. Don't waste the time. Don't do it at all. But if it's going to cost like Alex Young or something like that, I mean, who cares? A AAA reliever, which is probably the value for a 40-year-old first baseman who's coming off of an injury. I would say do it. So that's kind of my philosophy. Is I wouldn't have let it get to the point where he was going to play for another team, even with all the depth we talked about, just how this team didn't have many veterans. But now that you're in this spot, if the front office David Bell can help mend the relationship and help get this, like, everyone, back in line and say, hey, Joey, why don't you come try to break some more records here with the Reds? Why don't you try to like boost that average, to keep it above 300? That would be something I think that would be good, and maybe get the fans more involved as they go down the stretch with a team that, again, looks like probably not going to make the playoffs in my mind. But if you're going to do it with a team, like if the Blue Jays have no use for Joey Votto on a team that's not going to make the playoffs for them from their end either. So
yeah,
that's what I'm thinking.
And that's the thing is, it's like, why not do it? You lose one guy who you're probably not going to use anymore, right? Like you just have no use for. I mean, just trade some no-name person and go get him. Right? Let the Blue Jays take a flyer on somebody who they think might have some potential that they haven't. And if he turns into the best reliever on the Blue Jays, who cares? Right? Like, the bullpen is not a problem necessarily for this team. Diaz has not been great, but for the most part, this bullpen has been fine. Like, you don't need to bring somebody else up. I would just like to see them take a chance and go get him. They need a veteran guy. He would come back, make some hilarious joke about, oh yeah, I just took a vacation and stayed at home in Toronto, but I'm back. Don't worry about it. Like, it would be like he never left because he's been injured anyways. So it's not like he's been playing. You know what I mean? Like, just do it and see what happens. I promise you that he would be better than the guys that we have now, Joe. I just know it, and I will be honest with you. If they went out and got him, I would be willing to to figure some way out, maybe even make an honest bet on the Reds making the playoffs. I think he would help them that significantly. I'd still prefer them also go out and get another outfield bat, to be honest with you. But if they're really just going to be complete cheapskates, just go get your man. Go get the guy who has done it all for you and let him help lead this team one more time into the breach and see if he can find a way to push them over the top, because they're still in it. 5 games out at the All-Star game is nothing. It's nothing. The Braves were even just talking about how they went and took 10 games back a few years ago from the Mets. Teams have meltdowns. Teams also have a lot harder schedules than the Reds do in the second half of the season. It's just a fact at this point. And if you get Joey Votto in there and he can even hit like he has in the past 260, Joe, 240 even, that's 50 points better than Will Benson right now. That's 30 points better than Nick Martini. He'll probably have more home runs. He'll definitely get on base more than them. And this team may actually have a lot more pizzazz. Like, the young guys respect Joey as well. Like, it just feels like a no doubter to me. Like, I doubt this will ever reach Nick Krall, but like, just go make the deal. Who cares? He doesn't cost anything either. He's already under contract. You don't have to renegotiate with him right now. And let's say he hits really well this year, Joe. Guess what? You resign him for a couple million next year. You keep the fans happy. And he really gets to have his last run with the Reds next year. That's where I'm at with it. It seems like a storybook kind of ending for him. It just makes too much sense for me at this point.
I wish I shared your blind optimism in him coming. That's not blind optimism, but optimism on him coming in and turning things around. It's going to take a lot for me to get back in on this team, but it would be nice to have a veteran leader. It would be nice to treat one of our all-time greats with a little bit of respect. Not that I think we disrespected him by not signing him, because it seemed like he wanted something different. He wanted more playing time, and the Blue Jays actually did want to use him this year before he got hurt. It seemed like they were signing him because it was like hey, we're going to actually use you off the bench, use you as DH, all that stuff. So I understand why he signed elsewhere, but I hope they do it. I hope they bring him back. I think it'd be good to get the fans involved at the end of the year. And if you do get closer to making playoff contention, I do think he's maybe more valuable than their current hitting coach. I do think he can help see things that maybe the hitting coach can't, because he's up there facing the pitchers. So that'd be nice too. But I don't think it's going to happen. I think the Reds front office has kind of resigned the fact that he's gone, he's not coming back type of thing. I don't know. It just doesn't seem like they're interested in that.
Nick Krall, you would be a silly man to not at least reach out to Toronto and see what they would take. Silly is the word I would use. All right, we move on. We got two more things to talk about before we get into the Rockies and Marlins. Joe, I know I've been optimistic on the McLean thing, and it's mostly just been because of what has been said. I thought he was done for the season. I told you guys that at the beginning of the year. I told Joe that separately when I was like, labrum tear. There's a chance he could come back, but that's pretty unlikely. And then on July 5th, just 3 days ago, Joe, we get this quote from David Bell. We did talk July 5th about Matt reaching some strength markers that he had to get to before he could progress. I was told July 5th. Now that he hit that, we're putting together kind of the rest of his progression. Baseball activities should be starting where we do mostly in Arizona, but I think he'll join us. I don't know if it'll be here, maybe on the next road trip, but he'll be around a little bit more, especially as he gets closer. The last sentence is the most important one to me, Joe. Baseball activities can mean a lot of things. But if he's saying, especially as he gets closer, that means that they are anticipating a Matt McLean return of some type this season. I put forth this question at the beginning of, at the beginning of the episode. Do you even want Matt McLean to try and come back this season? I'll let you lead off here. What are you thinking with this one?
Yeah, I do not. I would rather him completely rehab. I would rather have him start working on building up strength, try to get to a point where he works with the trainers on preventing injuries, not just, trying to get strength as well, but, just do all that stuff. This week could decide it, to be honest. Like, this is the easiest week the Reds will probably ever have in the history. They're playing two last-place teams, 7 games at home. If you win all 7, if you win 6, maybe you want to bring him back at the end of next month, or at the end of this month, and have him start being around and just see what he's comfortable with. I just don't know. It's hard to see the Reds winning as many games as maybe they should this week after what happened this past week. So I do think it's dependent on how they do before the All-Star break. I do think this is a huge week in Reds baseball. If people are still holding on to hope, I don't have that hope anymore. I think they just had too many injuries, too many philosophy differences and all that. I don't know if it's really possible. So I would say let him rehab, let him get back for next year, because the last thing I want to do I'm sitting here wearing a Bengals shirt right now, is have like Joe Burrow get hurt every other year. And it's like, that now Joe Burrow this offseason, Rob, and we have a lot of Cincinnati fans who listen, like now he's added 10 to 15 pounds of strength. Whereas
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, if you would have had that before, maybe you don't have some of these injuries. Maybe not. I don't know. But typically that's how you would think. So I would love for him to kind of get ready for next season. But again, it could depend on how we do. Like if it comes back and we win these 7 games this week, we win 6 of them. Maybe it's like, hey, we have a real shot. If it's we go 500 this week, it's like, hey, if we can't beat these teams, how are we going to make up 5 games against some of the schedule we have in the second half?
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't want to cop out and be like, hey, it depends. But, Joe, I think it really just does depend. Because I think if the Reds are in the thick of the playoff hunt, truly, like either they're a game or two behind or whatever, bringing back even an 85, 90% Matt McLain, and you're fairly certain that that shoulder injury is not going to get worse, at least, I think you take the chance, personally. I think honestly, even if they're within 3 or 4 games and you have a month left, roll the dice, man. Let them go, because this team could use playoff experience. While I would like to, most of the time I am of the opinion, don't just make the playoffs, try to go for a World Series, right? Like that's the only goal. With the way this team is set up, with how young they are, playoff experience could be very valuable for players like Elly De La Cruz, Matt McLain, Spencer Steer, right? Even honestly, Hunter Green, Lodolo, and Abbott, like that would be huge for them going forward. So I'm not going to say that they should rush him back. It doesn't seem like he's going to be able to come back until early August at the most, anyways. But if he's going to be back with the team, he's starting in Arizona probably in the next week or two, to be honest with you, with the way that it sounds. There's a world where he could come back in mid-August and they still have a month and a half left of baseball to play. That's still like 30, 35 games, maybe 40. And that's a significant time. I mean, he could come back and in a 40-game split, hit 310 or even 275, right? Like we'll bring down the optimism from unrealistic levels. So like a 260, 275 hitter, he's driving in runs, he's getting on base more. They just aren't having him steal and do, crazy things. But if you do that, then I would say why not? But yeah, to your point, Joe, if they're still 5, 6, even God forbid 7 or 8 games under 500 come the All-Star break, I think you just tell him, hey man, you just go rehab, go do your thing. Don't worry about this season. We'll see you next year. But if they're close, then why not? So let us know what you guys think. Like we said, hopefully you commented before this point, but we'd love to hear your thoughts on that. We'll move on to the last topic, Joe, unless you got anything else on Matt McLain. All right. Reds All-Stars. All-Star teams got announced. The Reds did get one, as per your prediction. I was feeling maybe they might get two. I think it was not the guy that we thought it was going to be, if I remember correctly. Like, we thought he had a good chance as well, but we thought it would be Hunter Green. Even after a great outing from Hunter Green, Elly De La Cruz gets the nod. And I can't say I'm totally surprised. It felt like MLB was going to get him in there unless if he was batting like 210, Joe. It just feels like they needed him. They wanted him in the All-Star game. They love to promote him, and I love it. He's 22. He's still figuring out baseball, but he's been a lot better, Joe. Everything has looked better so far this season, so I will say I think it's earned. I believe, you could correct me if I'm wrong, definitely for sure for the hitters, but I want to say he's also the highest WAR on the team, Joe, overall. If it's not him, then it's one of the other 3 starting pitchers that we talked about. But if I remember correctly, he's like somewhere around like a 2 WAR, something like that.
Him and Hunter Green are tied at 3.2.
3.2. Okay. So realistically, it could have been either of them. I just think I looked at the pitchers that they, had come in, including our old friend, what's his face? Hoffman. I can't remember his first name, but the guy we tried to rehab from the Rockies, Joe. What is his name?
Jeff Hoffman.
God, I wanted to say Trevor, but I know that that's the old closer. So Jeff Hoffman, which was cool to see him, honestly, you get there. But it made sense for them to put Elly in. 43 stolen bases, the best in baseball. It's just, you got to get that guy in there. And I will tell you, Joe, I think he is actually very deserving. He has played so much better. His defense is still a little suspect. We'll work on that. But, um, you know, I really believe that if he doesn't have just that awful stretch in May, I think this guy's batting like 260, 275, and he's looking a lot better. He's striking out less. I know he still leads the team in strikeouts, but a lot of those were when he was striking out basically every other at bat early in the season. He's making more contact. He's just getting better. And this game's about stars. That's literally why it's called the All-Star game, right? I think he's our biggest star, and he's the guy people are going to come to watch. So major congrats to Elly. I would be shocked if this is his only All-Star game in his career.
I think this is like one of the most first-time All-Stars we've ever
Mm-hmm.
seen for Major League Baseball. That's been like kind of the thing. Paul Skeens gets in even not after not starting the year in the Major League level. He's pitched
Deserved.
awesome for the Pirates, so they're doing, I think, a good job of like not like messing with things to get guys that shouldn't be there in, but they're making sure that the right guys are there because these are guys that aren't voted. Both Paul Skeens and Elly were
Mm-hmm.
not voted in. So I would say, yeah, the one I kind of expected to be a pitcher. In terms of ERA, I believe Andrew Abbott is 11th in the National League and Hunter Green is 15th. Now, only starting pitchers qualify for that pretty much with the innings pitched right now. So that kind of makes you like, hey, maybe there'll be a replacement if someone gets hurt. But I don't know. I think those guys have been kind of carrying the team. I don't want to say Elly's undeserving. I just think those guys might be deserving as well. I think
Yeah.
especially Hunter Green. We're going to talk about like, hey, Paul Skeens is in, and Paul Skeens has pitched better than Hunter Green by pretty much every objective statistic you could find, other than Hunter Green's pitched here the whole year. He's another guy that I would love if I'm baseball to have people see Hunter Green pitch in an All-Star game, like how big a prospect he was, how fast he throws, how much he gets people out with the four-seam fastball is something that no one else in baseball can match right now. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I'm with you. I think Elly deserves it. Elly's in. I would have liked to see one of the pitchers in. I wouldn't put it past one of these. This week someone gets injured and they call one of these pitchers in.
Well, I think already Zach Wheeler was supposed to be in, and he's not going to be able to go. I can't remember if it's for injury or whatnot, but I will say, looking at it, excuse me, real quick, Hunter Green is also 11th in strikeouts at 116. So, and he'll get one more start before the All-Star game. There's a real world where he's in the top 10 based on how he's been pitching. So, I think that they really should consider it. If you want to even talk just about the NL specifically, let me bring this up here. National League. In the National League, he is 7th in terms of strikeouts. His whip has been good. His average against has been good. Looking at just starting pitchers, I do apologize, guys. I didn't have this ready because I wasn't anticipating us talking about this necessarily. But for starting pitchers, his ERA is 15th in the NL. I think you said that. Did you say that? Okay, I couldn't remember if you just said
Yeah.
NL or I couldn't remember if it was NL or MLB. I do apologize for that. But even still, like that's truly outstanding for him. I'm honestly really I want to say the word proud because he has really worked hard, I think, to get to this level. And it's just impressive to see, I think, how much he has grown as a starting pitcher and how much more confident I am that deal that the Reds did with him may look like one of the best deals in baseball in the next few years, without a doubt. It is sad. I think if Andrew Abbott had more strikeouts, I think he would be considered a lot more, to be honest with you as well. But and I think if Lodolo was available, he'd be there. It is mind-boggling to me right now that we have three unbelievably great starting pitchers right now, Joe, and we're at the position that we're at. But I do think truly that Hunter Green, he's got to be on the short list to be getting in. I think we'll see him get in as well.
Yeah, I kind of doubted Elly getting in because I think a lot of times the voters don't care about this, but I think the managers still care about some of the stats that are historically more relevant in baseball. Stats that I love, on base percentage, average, all that, home runs, RBIs, all that. And, that's something that a lot of Elly's game can't be tracked with just that because he has that WAR that's, 3.2. Talking about WAR with some of these pitchers, too. I mean, 3.2 for Hunter Green. It's 7th in all seventh against all pitchers in the league in the Major League Baseball, second in the National League. So if we do get some like frontward thinking people who are going to use WAR, and like WAR is a pretty good stat. It's not the best stat all be it's not everyone. Some people use it as like the end all be all. It's not that, but second in the National League for pitchers behind Ronaldo Lopez of the Braves in WAR. Andrew Abbott is 13th in the Major League Baseball in WAR at 2.8 for starting pitchers. If some of these decisions get made by different people, I think maybe these guys get in on the first glance, and definitely on the second glance if you look at it that way. Now, like again, a lot of these people, like Hunter Green in the top 15, has like the worst ERA out of any of them at 3.45. It's not bad, but just if you're looking at all stars, that's pretty. That's what's going to do you in. It's not even the top 30. Like it's the worst in the top 30. But you have to take into account how many times he's been put in bad situations, how well he's pitched to get out of jams, his own jams this year. So yeah, I do think that they are deserving. I would have thought that they would have gotten in over Elly, just based on the fact that again, Elly's traditional stats maybe aren't up to par with previous All Stars. But yeah, it's great to have some of these young guys who should be getting these looks. Elly definitely getting in the All Star game. Hunter Green and Andrew Abbott. We might see him if people do look at this WAR. It's pretty glaring that you'd have guys in the top 10, top 15 in WAR at a position and not be in.
Yeah, it's pretty wild to me, honestly. Sorry, I'm trying to look at this list as well with you because for some reason I am struggling to find it. But yeah, it's wild because I think, yeah, that's crazy to me. I had no idea Hunter Green was that high up. I mean, good for him, truly. You're right. I think there's a real world because you normally see 4, 5, 6 pitchers drop off most times on both teams. I think Hunter Green probably is like got to be one of the next guys on this list to make it. To be honest with you, I would be almost more surprised if he didn't make it in at this point. I think he's gonna kind of slide in there right at the last second and end up getting his first nod in his career as well at only 24, 25 years old. So which is pretty wild to me. Yeah, 24 years old. Crazy.
And the good news for him too is there's some guys who can't be called up because of when their last start is. They won't be able to pitch on that Tuesday, or managers won't like that. His last start is going to be Thursday against the Rockies. That gives him plenty of time to get ready for that Tuesday game, and then obviously you get the All-Star break after that. He's only going to pitch an inning or two, maybe. It's not going to be that big of a deal if he goes to the All-Star game. Whereas other players who could be called up may not have that luxury of having so much time in between their last start and the All-Star game.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. He has really been a stud this year. It's kind of crazy. I'm seeing right now his home ERA is a 4.19. His away ERA must be like a 2. That's pretty crazy to me, to be honest with you. It's not like he's giving up a ton of home runs this year either. So good for him. The last thing I wanted to talk about real quick about Elly, Joe. We're right about the same amount of at-bats in games as he had last year, by the way. So we are about 50 at-bats away, 8 games away. So, he probably won't hit the extra 50 at-bats, but he is 8 hits, 7 runs behind where he was. He has more doubles. He's 1 triple behind, 2 more home runs, 5 RBIs behind. He's got 7 more walks, 23 less strikeouts at the moment, and 8 more stolen bases. His batting average is 12 points higher. His OBP is 39 points higher, and his slugging is 54 points higher for an overall OPS of almost 100 points higher, Joe. Look, I think he's making great strides. Do you think he ends up surpassing literally all of these stats here over the last 8 games before the All-Star game?
No, because I think a lot of the stats you listed, like RBIs and a lot of that, that's based on how other players do.
No,
and he doesn't have the supports. And maybe not all of them, but he's shown the growth. And I think, if he can get his average up this many points, his on-base percentage up this many points, there's hope that like next year he can boost it up a little bit too and get up to like that 260 batting average range, maybe 360 on base, 350, especially if people start avoiding him and he gets help in the lineup. It's amazing that he's grown that much in average and on-base percentage with having so many hitters who aren't doing so well this year around him.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy to see it. It gives me a lot of hope. His batting average on balls put in play as well is basically the exact same. So that just shows how much his speed comes into play, and just the fact that as he continues to get better and learns how to put the barrel on the ball more often. It gives me a lot of hope for him. So I just wanted to bring that up as well. I know we're talking about him as an all-star, but it just shows to me I don't think that this is going to be his last all-star game. I think this is going to be the first of potentially many. It'll depend on how long he's a Red, to be honest with you. We'll have to see about that, but just figured it was worth bringing up for the listeners at home and for us to do a quick discussion about. We move on, though, Joe, to, like you have said, a very important week. A lot of the times that we've said it, every week has obviously been important for this Reds team at this point, but a lot of the time it's been because they're playing teams that are really good. This time we are playing two teams that are averaging 31 and a half wins on the season, Joe. That is quite bad, in case if you guys did not know. The top teams in baseball have 58 wins. Right now, the Reds are a full 10 games up on both of these teams. The last time we saw the Rockies was at their place, and we swept them at their home. We'll start off with this. It's going to be Andrew Abbott getting the ball Monday night. Frankie Montas, then Carson Spires or Lodolo. I don't know for sure, Joe. Lodolo should be back. So I'm thinking it's going to be Lodolo, but we'll have to see if they give him just a couple extra days and move it to the Ashcraft start later in the week or not. But Lodolo will be back this week in one of these games. And then you have the last start, like you talked about, with Hunter Green on Thursday. Closer still Beeks. You got a lineup of Blackman, Tovar, McMahon, Diaz. I don't know if Bryant's back or not, but Brendan Rodgers, Montero, Doyle, Bouchard, J.K., Jacob Stallings. Doesn't really matter at this point. Not trying to be a jerk about it, but this team is just not good. They're not hitting well. I don't even know that if Elias Diaz is even going to still be on the team later in this week, to be honest with you. They may wait until the trade deadline, but if they get a good enough deal while they are in Cincinnati, I could totally see them shipping him off here in the next couple of days. This team can't pitch, Joe. They just can't. The Reds' number one nemesis has been very good starting pitching. They have done pretty decently against pitchers with like a 3.5 plus ERA. Anything lower than that, they have been basically unable to hit them whatsoever. This feels like a good series for them, Joe. They are at home. I wanted to throw it over to you first and see what your predictions are. I am going to keep my predictions. I'm going to write them down now and go from there. So I'm putting it in there so you can see it, but you go so I don't cheat.
Okay. I didn't see it, but I'll figure it out. There it is. Okay, I see it. Yeah, you're right. This pitching was actually better the last time we faced him. Austin Gomer's fallen off the face of the earth. He's down to a 4.47 ERA. Cal Quantrill's been okay, 3.7 ERA. You got that ballpark out there. Ryan Feltner's been awful. We obviously play him in the first game of the series. That's the X factor here. Now, I don't know. I'm torn on this because, last week the Tigers had two good starting pitchers out of their three. Reese Olson, obviously, just so much bad luck with the wins he has this year with the ERA. He's a top 20 ERA, but had two wins heading into that game. That's just not his fault. But we beat the Yankees, who did have good starting pitching, although they aren't pitching well right now.
Yeah.
Because the Yankees are in a free fall. Maybe that's why we beat them, honestly, because they lost, I think it was 12 of their last 16 after the Red Series, and now it's like even worse after the Red Sox. That's it's kind of driving me here. Is like this team is not good. But we don't beat teams who aren't good all the time either. We don't take care of business the way we should. It seems like we can beat the Yankees, Dodgers, and Phillies, and that's just totally random. But everyone else is very, very much up in the air, and our record probably is way worse. We're going to take those teams out of it. So I'm going to be very conservative here, Rob. I'm going to say 2-2. This Rockies team is bad. I think if everything was going as planned this year, I'd say this is a 3-1, 4-0 series. 3-1 probably because something will go wrong, just how it usually goes. I'm going conservative. I can't trust them. They had chances to beat the Tigers. They've had in the last couple of weeks, they've had chances to win these games. And like I said last week, like base running errors or defensive errors kill them. So I'll say 2 wins. I think, again, I'll stick with the Abbott and Green starts as being wins. And then whatever happens in between with Montas and Spires, it's cool if you can get a win. I just don't really see it, even though they are going up against pitchers who are equal or definitely worse than some of them. So that's kind of where I'm at with it. I'm going to go 2-2, but again, normally 3-1.
I am in mostly agreement with you, but I feel like this team will feel the pressure a little bit this week because they know who they've got to face. And I think you got Abbott and Green. I think it is Lodolo. You and I talked about it was July 10th was the day he could come back. That, excuse me, perfectly lines up with this start. I think they maybe kick Spires back 2 days because he still has been better than Graham Ashcraft, or at least they kick it back to make the decision on it in a couple days. Either that or we're going to find out based on the Slater trade because we still don't know who is getting sent down to AAA for Slater. I'm imagining it's going to be Blake Dunn, but I don't know for sure. I am going to go 4-0, and here's why. We were able to sweep them at their place. Great American Ballpark plays a little bit like Colorado in the sense of the ball goes flying out. Their starting pitchers have not been very good. We have better starting pitching, and I think we'll get a lead early on enough to where you can use Lucas Sims, you can use Sam Mole, you can use some of these more reliable relievers, even maybe the Buck Farmers at different points, and maybe even Diaz won't need to get a save. Their lineup still scares me. Like, they have some decent hitters in it without a doubt, but this team feels like they've already given up at this point. The Reds are at least still in it. And you have a couple, I think, very good players pitching wise that are going to be leading the team this week. I just feel like this will be their opportunity to come back. I really do. I'm sure I'm going to regret it. I would feel more comfortable with a 3-1, but I'm putting the pressure on them. They've got to win these games, in my opinion. I think this has to be a 6-1 week at a minimum for them to feel really comfortable heading into the All-Star game. At that point, you're only, 2 games back? No, 1 game back. At that point, you are 1 game back, and I think that is enough to give this team a chance to get into the All-Star game and have a break. I'm not going to fully give up hope just because these two teams are bad. And the Reds have, for the most part, taken care of business against some of the worst teams, like when they faced the Angels and the White Sox earlier this season. For some reason, it's just been divisional opponents that have not been good that they've been struggling against. Pirates and Cardinals, which has been very strange. So I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. I think they're seeing the Rockies for the second time. They'll see a couple of these pitchers for the second time. That bullpen is just god-awful. Their entire pitching staff truly is just not very good. And so I'm going to assume that the Reds can score enough runs that where our starting pitching will be better than theirs and we'll be able to win a slobber knocker of a series is what I'm going to call it. So that's what I'm going to go with. I'm going to give ourselves a little bit of credit here. We head into the Marlins game over the weekend, right before we head to the All-Star break. Ashcraft or Lodolo or Spires, one of the three of them are going to pitch that day. We really don't know who yet. We will not know who until we get to the Wednesday game, Joe. But one of them, or I guess if David Bell says it earlier than that, but one of them will be starting that game. Then you get another game of Andrew Abbott and another Frankie Montas game to close things out. Their lineup consists of Jazz Chisholm Jr., Brian De La Cruz, Josh Bell, Jesus Sanchez, Jake Berger, Dane Myers, Xavier Edwards, Vidal Brujan, Nick Fortes, Emmanuel Rivera, Jonah Bride, Nick Gordon, and Dane. Oh, I said Dane Myers already. What? Oops. Somebody else who I missed, but whatever. Look, this team has some okay hitters. I think Jazz is a little overrated. Unfortunately, I don't think that's necessarily his fault. But I think he's a solid player, but not great. Brian De La Cruz has had a good season. Josh Bell is always relatively good, a little bit above average, maybe I would say. Sanchez and Berger can hit. Edwards and Brujan were both products of the Rays system, who they traded off, which generally means that they must not be super good. I really wanted Brujan in a trade a couple years ago, honestly, but he has not been necessarily fantastic yet. The rest of their team's not good. Their starting pitching is awful. One of the worst rotations in baseball this season, Joe. Their bullpen hasn't been great either. They already traded away their best hitter. I wouldn't be surprised if they make another move. We may not even see a De La Cruz or a Bell, maybe even a Berger, by the time that we get to our series, because this team is in full-on sell mode. it's just another advantageous season, or not season, an advantageous series for the Reds. That being said, I think that we are going to drop at least one game this week. I'm just going to pick it here because I think a random Saturday or Sunday game could be it for us. It really depends, I think, on who's going to start that Friday game, Joe. I'm going to pick a 2-1 here for us just to keep it consistent. We get to the 6-1 that I was hoping for. We're one game under 500 at that point, unless if my Miami maths are completely off. And I think that likely brings us within 2 or 3 games of the wild card, Joe. And that's just where I'm at with it. I'll be honest. That's just where I'm at. I just don't think this Marlins team, I think they're even worse than the Rockies, to be honest with you. So, which has kind of been shown for most of the season anyways. So, it feels like a team that's kind of given up. Yeah, that's where I'm at. I don't have anything else to add.
I mean, you're right. If the Reds play like they're supposed to, they should go 6-1 this week. I think it's fair to say, hey, they'll drop a game somewhere, but they should win 5 to 6 games this week. I'm going to say they win 4. I'm going to go 2-1 in the series as well. I think the Marlins are a very bad baseball team, one of the worst you'll see in Major League Baseball. Partially their fault, partially not their fault. Their starting pitching has been awful, but they also have more than a full rotation on the IL this year for starting pitchers. Jesus Luzardo, Braxton Garrett, Ryan Weathers, Sixto Sanchez, Sandy Alcantara, and Yuri Perez. Those are some decent names in that list. So names. We're getting, and they built the team around that too. Everyone thought they'd be good at this point because they would have that young pitching going, and as we're finding out too, sometimes injuries derail that. Their hitters aren't very good. Jazz Chisholm leads the team with 255 average. A couple weeks ago we would have been dying for a guy at 255 average until Jonathan India turned it on. So no hate there, but they just don't really have much else. Remember they did get rid of Tim Anderson, who wasn't playing well for them as well. That's obviously he hit 214, which I mean again. Give me someone who hits 214 on this team sometimes. Oh my gosh! But no, I think this is a very bad baseball team. They already traded Arias. I don't think they're going to make moves before they play the Reds. They could if they get a good offer. But this is a team that you should probably sweep. I think they'll go 2-1. Again, no hate on the Marlins. I think you tried to build a good team surrounded by that starting pitching, and that when that fell apart, everything else just kind of fell apart. But there's just not much to the lineup. There's not much to the lineup that scares me. With all the pitchers out, the pitchers don't scare me. We have this one at home. Fingers crossed that they should be able to win at least 2 games.
Yeah, we're facing the 2 of the 3 worst teams in terms of run differential this week, Joe. The worst is still the White Sox at -164. Second worst is the Rockies at 149. And then the Marlins at 134. If you consider the run differential, the Reds are a plus 148 over the Marlins and a plus 163 over the Rockies. So even if with injuries, if Austin Slater can come in and get 1 hit a night, 1 out of 4 hits a night, I think this Reds team has that much better of a chance of winning, Joe. I think India's been hitting. I think Steer has been coming on as of late. I think he has like 4 or 5 straight games with an extra base hit, which has been nice. Stevenson's back. He's going to be playing a lot more because they're not going to be playing Austin Wynns on a very regular basis. I think he gets maybe 1 start this week, maybe 2, depending on how things are going for the team. I just feel like while our lineup is pretty bad, Will Benson also seemingly hits random home runs against some of the worst teams this year have been most of his home runs. I'm not trying to be too optimistic here, Joe. I think 5-2 seems probably like the most realistic one. I'm still going to stick with my 6-1, but I do think 5-2 is very realistic. And at that point, again, the Reds are 3 games under? Yeah, 3 games under at that point, going into the All-Star break. And regardless, unless if they just have a catastrophic week, they are going to still be in the hunt, and I think the front office is going to have to do some soul searching at that point, Joe, in the biggest way possible.
Yeah, well, hopefully they can split the difference. If I'm at 4-3 and you're at 6-1, hopefully they split the difference at the very least and go 5-2. You're right. Like this is tough because this is the week where it's not just do we go for it. A lot of players might be traded. Do we trade Jonathan India? We talked about that last week. There's a lot to be said with this, and also a lot of it is out of our control too. Because yes, we can control win 4, 5, 6 games this week. But a lot of these teams who are in the wild card spot are starting to pick up some steam and starting to
Hmm.
create that separation. Like it was very close together a couple weeks ago. And now we have like the Braves in the first spot of the wild card, 10 games over 500. The Cardinals are 5 games over 500. The Padres, 4 games under 500. So it's going to take, us winning those games, but it might be, hey, we win some games, but we stay 4 games back in the wild card playoffs. So there's a lot of moving parts right now. I don't envy the Reds front office in this situation. I do want to say they probably put themselves in this position by some of the moves they've made in the past. But
Yep.
yeah, it's a very big week. If you're holding on to hope for the Reds playoffs, it's a very big week. If you're even seeing, hey, we might be trading some guys. Either way, it's a big week for all Reds fans.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting because there are a lot of big games coming up. The Braves are going to be playing Arizona this week. The Cardinals will be playing the surprising Washington Nationals this week, and the Padres will have tough customers against the Seattle Mariners this week as well. Seattle has been one of the best teams in baseball in terms of their starting pitching. I believe they are leading their division. Yeah, they are leading their division now with some of the least runs. I think they have the least runs given up in baseball. They do. 346. Or no. Sorry, third least. Braves and Phillies have less, but still. Very good for them. So it's been a good team. We're going to just have to hope for a little bit of help. And the Reds have to take care of business this week, Joe. There's just no other ifs, ands, or buts about it. In my opinion, if they go 4-3 or worse, then it's sell time. I'll put it that way. I think they have to win at least 5 games for them to seriously consider themselves as contenders, because we'll have the All-Star break, but then you're on the road against the Nationals, on the road against the Braves, and on the road against the Rays, and then you finish out 3 games at home against the Cubs. So not a horrible schedule, but not an easy one to say the least. And August gets a little bit easier for the most part, other than playing the Brewers and the Royals. So they still have plenty of time to make up some games here, Joe, but it's got to start this week. There's just no ifs, ands, or buts about it, in my opinion. So you going to leave us with any words of wisdom before we head out?
No, excited to watch this week, but I have no wisdom left for this team. I thought I had some wisdom with their preseason predicting them to get like 85 wins. I'm out on the whole wisdom thing for right now. I'm just going to watch and see what happens and analyze as it comes to me with this manageable schedule this week.
Okay, well, that sounds good. And I think that'll wrap it up for us, Joe. And with that, guys, we'll catch you on the next one.